What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. Week 2 officially in the book, so it's time to talk about top waiver wire options for week 3. Actually, not too many appealing options this week, but definitely some names we should go over. I'd say overall, though, if you're in a competitive 12-team league, there probably isn't a player on free agency that you're spending more than 7 to 10% on. There's a chance that someone that's 80, 85% owned happens to not be owned in your league, right? That means that 15 to 20% of you, they'll see them available. But I'm pretty sure everyone that we go over today is at least available in 40% of leagues. So, unlikely that that type of player is being talked about today. Let's start off with wide receivers, where the top option would be one of the Commanders' wide receivers. So Jahan Dotson's probably the most likely to be available, but if Curtis Samuel happens to be there as well, both of these players should be owned in all leagues. If either of them is on free agency, claim them. Probably don't have to go into that too much. Jahan Dotson, really talented first-round rookie, performing really well so far. And that passing offense is performing really well as well. So if he's available, get him. Same thing, Curtis Samuel being involved a ton in the offense. But, odds are neither of them are available. The next option I'd look to, who could have been dropped recently, is probably George Pickens. I feel like he's also still rostered in most competitive leagues, but I have seen him dropped in a lot of places. I've gotten a lot of questions about people asking, hey, he's been dropped. Should I go after him? He is someone who, maybe someone drafted just based off of the hype, right? There was a lot of hype around George Pickens over the offseason. Maybe they watched the first 2 weeks. Don't really see it in the box score. Cut him. But he was someone that, we figured would probably start the season slow. Usually it's the second half of the year for rookie wide receivers where they truly break out. And that's especially the case if you have someone behind Deontay Johnson, who's got a 33% target share, a really talented wide receiver. Maybe we can see a Drake London start to break out really, really early when there's, no wide receiver talent ahead of them. But on a team with a lot of talent, it's likely that Pickens is going to break out in the second half of the season. But I still think that he's very clearly going to be their number 2 wide receiver over the second half. If something happens to Deontay Johnson, he's already just a weekly must start. And so not someone you expected to rely on right now, didn't draft to rely on right now. And so if he got dropped, it's still a long-term play. So I'd pick him up. If they're unavailable, I think you're looking at Russell Gage, probably the next most likely to be there. Mike Evans suspended for week 3. Godwin likely going to be out. I feel like it's probably confirmed that he's going to be out. And then Julio already banged up. Obviously, we don't know his status just yet, but the odds he's 100% come week 3, unlikely. So Gage, he's going to have a much larger role to fill. Now, he's not Mike Evans, he's not Chris Godwin. If one of them were in this spot with the only healthy wide receiver, they're going to smash. Gage, not necessarily guaranteed to smash, but as the clear top wide receiver on the Bucs, he has to be rostered everywhere. So if he's available, get him. After that, I'd say it's a tie between Michael Gallup and Rondale Moore. Both are close to returning. There's a lot of optimism that Gallup is going to return really soon, and we have to imagine that Rondale Moore is pretty close to returning as well. And when people see the role that both of these players have, they're going to be the top waiver wire ad the following week after their return. People are going to see how involved Rondale Moore is, and they're going to be like, why was this guy on free agency? He's, close to a weekly start in this offense. Now, we'll have to see the offense. Maybe Marquise Brown starts to get going. Maybe Hopkins, when he returns, it changes things. But, if Rondale Moore started next week, you'd be considering starting him. That's how good he's going to be. And so I want to roster him. And especially in leagues, with an IR spot. If you're not using your IR spot and Michael Gallup's on free agency, you got to get him. I mean, it's just a very clear ad there. He's going to have a pretty large role, easy number 2, and they need that. They've kind of been struggling with only having CeeDee Lamb as a talent. I know Noah Brown's been okay, but he's Noah Brown, right? Michael Gallup is still better than him. If those are unavailable, or if you're looking kind of beyond that group, 6 more names that aren't necessarily players you need to go after. So if you're those people are already rostered, what are some other names that I really want to add, I would say no one, to be completely honest, unless, again, like I said to start, if there's someone that's like 80, 85% roster, I'm not going over them in this video. But some players in maybe deeper formats, maybe competitive leagues, maybe you had Mike Evans, you had some of these other wide receivers that have been injured or suspended, then you can look to this list. But I would say for most of you, this list is more like keep an eye on, not necessarily need to add. So Richie James, Kyle Phillips, Zay Jones, Greg Dortch, Joshua Palmer, and Nelson Aguilar. Those are like the 6 that I would look at to have kind of a good opportunity here. Richie James, probably my favorite, 5 catches on 6 targets in back-to-back weeks. And honestly, he looks like the best Giants wide receiver at the moment. Kenny Golladay is just like dust at this point. He was in for like 2 snaps last week. He hasn't been involved. There were a lot of reports to close the offseason that he looked like a statue out there, that like he wasn't doing anything. So don't worry about Golladay. When Wandale Moore is active, he's going to be their best wide receiver. Obviously, he's like returning right now from his injury. Tony was also up to like 38% of the snaps after 12% in week 1, but he still only has 2 carries for 23 yards, 2 receptions for 0 yards on the entire season. I still think it's like 100% the wrong decision not playing Tony more than they are, but the Giants are going to keep him in the doghouse right now. So at least for now, you've got Richie James and you got Shepard as the 1 and the 2. And again, Richie James looks like the best wide receiver, and he had some really good games in the past. And so when Wandale returns, like he's going to be their best wide receiver. But until that starts happening, and even when it does, Richie James is going to get snaps. He's going to look good. And so I'd pick him up if you need a wide receiver. After that, I know Phillips, I don't even know his final stat line, but it's probably like 1 catch last night. Don't worry too much about that. I mean, Tennessee got steamrolled. They're playing in Buffalo, like just a brutal spot. I think they benched their starters for the entire 4th quarter. Like that was not, a normal outcome. You don't need to be running to the waiver wire to add a rookie who's coming off 1 catch on like 1 or 2 targets, but he's a name to keep in mind because he could end up being their 2nd best wide receiver behind Treylon Burks, and that'll have value on this new Titans offense that's not going to be as good, that is going to be throwing a lot more in the second half. And so, talented rookie, some upside in the second half, you could stash him. Zay Jones didn't do fantastic this week, but the Jaguars are going to throw the ball a lot this season, and he's going to run plenty of routes. Like, he's going to be out there most of the time. They do not have a rookie that's going to, perform better in the second half, kind of kick him out. Like, his role is defined. He's going to be someone who you can kind of rotate in to maybe your flex, maybe your wide receiver 2. Not going to be someone you're like excited to start, but in a good matchup, he won't be terrible. If you've got bye weeks, you've got injuries, like he's just someone who is going to go out there, get targets, a really good lower end option for your bench. The last 3, Dortch, Palmer, Aguilar, all fine, but they're definitely short-term options. These are not long-term options at wide receiver. Dortch is only a thing until Rondale Moore or Hopkins returns, which is going to be soon for at least one of them. Palmer only a thing until Keenan Allen returns. Even then, he's just fine. Like, he got super lucky with a touchdown to close out last week, but he's not someone you're going to feel comfortable starting even when Allen is out. Aguilar, only available to use while Thornton is injured. Again, that's kind of a short-term thing. I don't know how long Thornton's going to be out, but it's not going to be the full season. They're hoping he returns relatively quickly. And even while he's, out, it's Aguilar, right? We don't trust him. And then do we really want to be starting in a season-long format the deep ball wide receiver in the Patriots, who we know has had a history of having maybe a good game and then like 6 bad ones? Probably not. Running backs up next. Definitely a few options this week. But I would say a lot of them are handcuffs, and that's just something that you got to know with the running back position. Most of the time, your bench is going to have like 1 or 2 that are like, decent options. Maybe you're considering for the flex, but then your other spots on the bench are mostly going to be handcuffs, mostly going to be players who don't have a role right now. But if something happened to the starter, people are spending 50% of their fab to try and pick them up the following week. It'd be nicer if you already had them on your bench. Top 3, though, that have standalone value are Jeff Wilson, Raheem Mostert, and Mark Ingram. And I would say in that order for adding them, unless, of course, like if you have like Alvin Kamara, you probably should have already had Mark Ingram, but like you would change the order if you have the starter there. You all know I'm not really a huge fan of Jeff Wilson, but, getting pretty lucky at this point. I mean, we see the clear feature back Elijah Mitchell get hurt right away. Again, he just cannot stay healthy. You see in the next week, they're kind of splitting the touches between Wilson and Tyrion Davis-Price. Tyrion Davis-Price now has the high ankle sprain. I don't know the exact timeline there, but it's probably like a month to 2 months. And even when he returns, high ankle sprains, they're brutal. I mean, they impact you for the entire season. Like, we basically just can't even expect Davis-Price to really perform all that well, even when he's back later this season. And so you've just got running back after running back getting injured. You've got, Trey Lance going down, having a season-ending injury. That's going to boost Jeff Wilson because it's going to take away those quarterback runs. Like, all these factors just going into Jeff Wilson. So even though he's not that good of a player, unless they bring someone in, you've got Jordan Mason, who's like a lower-end option, but in like a 12-team league. Is fine. Is probably going to have to get work, but you see what I'm saying here. It's like they don't have that much talent anymore. So unless they're a team that goes out and trades for like Alexander Madison, or they're a team that trades for someone else, like, you got to imagine Jeff Wilson's getting those like 15 to 18 carries, maybe a target or two in the passing game. And even if he's not that good, he's going to produce. So you got to be adding Jeff Wilson at this point if he's available on free agency. After that, it would go down to Mostert. Always been a really efficient running back. Like, he's a good running back. His problem is like he has no upside. So there's no world. Just remember this. If you're adding him, you're like, wow, he performed really well. Is he going to get more and more touches? No. Like, he also ran a lot of routes this last Sunday, but they didn't throw the running backs that much. I think he only had like one reception, maybe only on one target. But the point is, they never want to overload Mostert. So he's not going to go out there and get 15 carries, 3 targets every week. Not going to happen. He's going to remain in this role that has like 9 to 11 carries, maybe a target here and there, maybe adds on a few touchdowns. I think a player like that, though, is like worth rostering if you get into trouble, bye weeks, injuries, terrible matchups. You need a running back too. If he is going to get 10 carries, he's probably turning that into around 45 to 55 yards unless he breaks a long one, which Mostert can do. Maybe he's adding in a touchdown, maybe a reception, and you're not going to be like super thrilled with starting him, but he gives you an out. He gives you an option to where it's like, if you just have your starters and handcuffs, well, you don't want to be starting the handcuffs, and so he's got standalone value. He should be rostered. And then again, the last one, Mark Ingram, standalone value right now while Kamara is out. It seems like Kamara's not going to have a long-term injury. He might be back this week, but I think we've seen I honestly wasn't sure that Mark Ingram was going to have, a large role in the offense while Kamara was out, getting up there in age, hasn't been performing as well in recent years. But it seems like he's going to have a role at least. And so he's like one of the premier handcuffs that really should be out. And if you've got Kamara, like, you just have to have Mark Ingram. The rest, pure running back handcuffs. Rashad White, Benjamin, and Darrell Williams. We'll talk about like that kind of combination there that we've never been able to figure out this offseason. Khalil Herbert, Tyler Algier, and then Jalen Warren. All players that you don't necessarily need to have the starter to have these players. It's just if you've got, an extra bench spot and you're like, what do I do for upside? Well, that's what you do for upside. You roster Rashad White in case Fournette has an injury. You roster one of Benjamin or Darrell Williams in case James Conner has an injury. He had one this week. Not looking like a major injury. Probably could have gone back into the game if it was a playoff game, if it was something that like really, really mattered, or if they like hadn't activated both Benjamin or Darrell Williams. Like he could have gone back into the game. It doesn't seem like he's going to be out for like a month for this one. But the point is, if David Montgomery went down, Khalil Herbert's going to have insane value. That last bench spot, should be reserved for someone like that and give your team a little bit of upside. That's probably the order I listed and I'll have on the screen is probably the order I'd add them in. But it really comes down to your personal preference. Which one do you think would perform really well? Which one do you think has a chance to take over? Again, none of them are going to have standalone value. But if you want someone to add that upside, those are players I would add. One note about Benjamin and Darrell Williams. So we saw in week 1, looks like Eno's the backup. And we're like, awesome. We finally figured it out, right? We couldn't figure it out all summer. Eno was getting touches. But Darrell was playing on special teams, and that was when Connor was healthy. It seems like, so we have Connor go down. Eno is going to be like what we thought, get some carries, but he's going to be more of that receiving back. But Daryl's still going to mix in. So my updated take on this backfield, if Connor were to miss time, is a timeshare. I don't think they're going to go to one backup. I think they're going to kind of rotate in both running backs. I still think you prefer Eno because if he has that passing game role, well, that's just more valuable. If they're going to even roughly split the touches on early downs, if you've got the one that's going to have, 3, 4, 5 targets, that's way more valuable than getting a few more carries, even when it comes with a slightly higher chance at the goal line, because it's not like you're going to completely go to one running back at the goal line. So it would be kind of 50-50. Again, I think you want Eno, but if you want to add one of them, whichever one you prefer, I would do that. Last one is Brian Robinson. I have him on my IR spot in 2 out of 3 leagues, and I really do think he's going to have value when he does end up returning. He looks good in the clips we've seen going around on Twitter right now. He seems like he's going to be fully recovered very soon. We haven't seen him into game action, I guess. We were only seeing him do individual drills, but it's pretty exciting seeing him already out there to start week 3. I think there's a chance he can return in week 5, but even if he doesn't come back at the minimum, I guess the maximum, he has to be out at least till week 5. He can come back in week 5. And so even if it takes him until week 6, week 7, he's going to return at some point. He was going to be the lead back when he was out. I think he resumes that role because it's not like, Antonio Gibson has done a whole lot to be oh, now we got to clearly go to Antonio Gibson. He has 3.1 yards per carry. He's been fine, but he's been fine. He's been exactly what he's been in prior seasons. Brian Robinson was just better. In the preseason, he was just better in camp. He's just a better running back, it looks like. So I think it's still Robinson's job when he returns. And if that's the case, even if it's a 1A, 1B situation, if he's on free agency and you've got an IR spot, or even if you don't, it's worth rostering because it's you've got these other running backs that we talked about that are handcuffs, if the starter went down. But we know there's a timeline for Brian Robinson potentially taking over, and it's not that far down the future. If you said Khalil Herbert, well, we know that, David Montgomery is going to, get way fewer touches in 3 weeks. Yeah, you're rostering Khalil Herbert in a ton of leagues, right? You're trying to get him everywhere. And so I think you're adding him. I think a lot of people may have forgotten about him, but he was the one. He was going to be the lead back before, of course, the carjacking, which was super unfortunate, but he's going to be back soon. Tight end. A few options, but pretty much the same as last week. The odds that at this point there's some new tight end that's breaking out and is a must-add top 5 tight end, very unlikely. We know who the top tight ends are. We know who has upside. No one's really surprising us at this point. Top 4 options in my eyes: Everett, Conklin, Logan Thomas, and Evan Ingram. And then you also have options for Isaiah Likely, Hayden Hurst, Robert Tonyan, Juwan Johnson. But let's be honest. That whole group of names, streaming options, I waited on tight end and I have to start someone, that's not going to be as good. No one I listed is going to be some clear top 5 tight end. I would say the most likely to fill that role would be Everett. He's on the best team. He's played 2/3 of snaps in back-to-back weeks. He's got 14 targets on the season. He's got a really strong role in the offense. He looks good. I don't think you can watch a Chargers game and not think that Gerald Everett looks really good out there with the ball in his hands. Obviously, you have to monitor the Herbert injury. I don't think you're starting Gerald Everett while Herbert is injured. We will see if Herbert misses any weeks, but I think regardless, it's worth rostering Gerald Everett because Herbert's not going to miss the whole season. He's going to come back at some point, and any tight end on a good team getting snaps and targets is worth rostering. But again, he looks really good. I think even if you wanted to add him as your tight end 2, you've got, Goddard or Hawkinson, I just think you should just be rostering Everett, even if it's to keep him away from your opponents. After that, Conklin should probably be rostered everywhere as well. Played 92% and 100% of the snaps in the first 2 weeks. You don't see that often, and 16 total targets. Now, a little bit inflated because they've had some really high pass attempts games, not always going to happen there, but he was someone we talked about as a deep sleeper over the offseason because he's not a bad receiving tight end. And if he's going to play 100% of the snaps, clearly play over CJ Uzomah, he should be rostered. I don't think you necessarily need to start him, but he should be on your roster. Logan Thomas in that list, you're probably just picking your favorite. There is not a lot separating any of these players. As I said last week, I'd say Logan Thomas and Robert Tonyan have the most touchdown upside. Both have recovered really nicely from their knee injuries. They have upside. You're really just looking for touchdowns this far down at tight end. Evan Ingram, in prior years, he's been a really good option. Has suffered a ton of injuries, poor play in recent years, but he's got 11 catches on 12 targets. And the Jaguars offense looks pretty good. I'm not going to say they're elite. I'm not even going to say they're above average, but they look a lot better than in previous years. And so that's pretty exciting. Clear top tight end there. He should be rostered. And then likely Hurst, Juwan Johnson, they're playing a lot. And they're on good passing offenses. So while none of them have a ceiling, likely rookie season playing behind Mark Andrews, no ceiling there. Hayden Hurst, the targets are going to Higgins, they're going to Chase, they're going to Boyd, they're going to Hurst after that. Not a lot of upside. And then Juwan Johnson, they've got Michael Thomas, they've got Alvin Kamara, they've got Chris Olave, they've got players as well. So even though these players are playing a lot, they have good roles. They should be definitely rostered in deeper formats. None of them have a true ceiling where if you're in a 10 or 12 team league, you got to be going after them. For quarterback, only 3 names: Tua, Wentz, Mariota. Tua is the most likely to be rostered already, but we talked last week in our favorite plays video on Saturday how pass heavy Miami is, how much they can explode if they are pushed on offense this season. Well, we saw that upside on Sunday. We saw an offense that was able to push them, that was also willing to lean pass heavy. Pretty obvious spot that was going to explode, and then it did. And we saw the upside. I have not finished the rest of season rankings, so update there. This video goes out maybe noon or something like that on Tuesday. I'm going to, after that's uploaded, put the final touches on the rest of season rankings. I'll get those out, the trade calculator out as well. So I don't know exactly where Tua is going to rank, but he's been really good. And I have to imagine with some of the poor performances that we have seen from some of these mid-range quarterbacks, he's going to be someone where you're looking at the rest of season rankings, you're yeah, I can actually roster this guy, even if it's as your quarterback too, as a streaming option, as someone to where, if you have Russell Wilson and he continues to perform poorly, maybe you're flipping Tua in your starting lineup. Another player that's kind of a similar deal is Wentz. Over 300 passing yards in each game, 7 touchdowns on the season. The reports that came out of camp where he was struggling, I don't know if they were wrong. Maybe he just put it all together, but he's not struggling right now. And he's benefited from 3 great wide receivers around him. He's looked good. He's putting up fantasy points. Again, I don't know that you're going out there every week and starting him, especially against the Eagles this week. It's a tough spot, but hey, it's a revenge game for him, and he's looked good. And if he can put it together against the Eagles, if he has another 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, we just need to be rostering him and really thinking about playing him most weeks. And then finally, Mariota. I didn't actually run as much this last week, didn't have as good of a game, but we know he's capable on the ground. We know he can have, 70, 80 rushing yards on the ground, add a touchdown there. The playmakers on the Falcons have looked better. They have Patterson, but Drake London has really outperformed expectations so far. He's performing phenomenally. We know Kyle Pitts is talented. He's going to be involved more very soon. And so Mariota just looks competent, and we know the cheat code with mobile quarterbacks. If you're going to add 3, 4, 5 points on the ground every single week, well, that's super valuable. And so he's an option to add as well. I would say more a 14 and 16 team league option for Mariota. I don't think that if you drafted a quarterback, in the top 12 rounds, that you're probably starting Mariota over them. But hey, some of you drafted Trey Lance. These are options. These are 3 options you can go for on free agency. Final thing this week is defense streaming options. Your best bets this week are Cowboys at Giants, Chargers versus Jaguars, Jaguars at Chargers, Falcons at the Seahawks, and then Broncos versus the 49ers, though that one's clearly last in the list for me. I'd really try and go after the Cowboys. Their defense looked really, really good last week. Giants, one of the worst 2-0 teams in NFL history. If they're unavailable, I would be fine taking the Chargers. I know Jacksonville, like I said, has looked a lot better this season, but they're still, mistake prone. They'll still give up some sacks, and the Chargers defense has looked phenomenally. And then I'll note on the Jaguars, it's only if Herbert is out obviously, like if Herbert plays, you're not picking up the Jaguars defense. It was requested that I mention a few players to close the video that I think are capable of being dropped. So here's some players who are rostered in at least 20% of leagues that I would be fine dropping. Elijah Mitchell, if you don't have an IR spot, or if you've got a bench but it's only like 5 players, or you've got a really, really small bench, you've got no IR spot, I don't think it's worth rostering him as that final bench piece for like 2 months. It's going to be a long-term injury, so I think you can cut him. Rex Burkhead, I think you got to carry this last week. You can cut him. Kenyon Drake, we know that Dobbins is returning. You never really should have even been rostering like Mike Davis and Kenyon Drake, but if you have them, get rid of them. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Tyler Boyd, Kadarius Toney, clearly in the doghouse. You can pick him back up if he comes out of the doghouse at some point, but you don't need to roster him, especially with Wando returning soon. Jarvis Landry doesn't need to be rostered. They're going to go with Olave, and Michael Thomas will be the clear number 3. Galladay, he's a statue. We don't need him anymore. Hunter Henry, Cole Kmet, Noah Fant, just lower end tight end options that really just are not involved in the offense right now. So I'd be fine dropping any of those players in your league. Again, it comes down to your league size, how competitive your league is. And so I can't give you like a perfect list that's going to fit everyone's needs. The rest of season rankings will go live, like I said, later today. I would use that to figure out, oh, this player is 20, 30 spots behind someone on free agency. Okay, well, if their value is that much worse, then yes, you can end up dropping that player. There's also going to be a column to where I'm going to add in, like, what league size they're worth rostering in. So that'll really be your go-to source for those types of questions. So that'll do it for the week 3 waiver wire video. Again, you can see the exact order on my website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com, and suggestions for exactly how much fab you should spend on all of these players. I'll be back tomorrow to go over players you should be trading for. Thursday, running back start sits. Friday, wide receiver start sits. But that, my friends, is the end of this one. Hope you all enjoyed. If you did, how about hitting the like button, and how about subscribing to the channel if you're new here? Thanks for watching.